Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi is Avodah Zarah daf Nun Aleph Avodah Zarah 51. Today's daf yomi is dedicated for a shmir for the Chayalim Atzol for the Shuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael on this East Torah. The Gemara tells us on the bottom of Nun Amud Beis 50b, 7 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav Avodas Kochavim She'ovdin Osel B'Makal. Let's say there's an idolatry that the typical way to worship it is with a stick. So then shava, basically, what do you mean you worship it with a stick? You like bang the stick like a hammer. So then shavar makal b'fanal, then if you broke the stick in front of it, then you're going to be chayav, you're going to be liable. Because Rashi explains that that's a manner in which you worship in the temple. And if you serve something in the manner in which you worship in the temple, then you'll be liable because it's like slaughtering in the temple. Zarak makol b'fanah, but if you threw the stick in front of it, you'll be pater because there's no service that's similar to throwing the stick. So Amarle Abai said to Rabba, Ma'ishna shever da'avle kein zvicha. Why is breaking the stick prohibited? Because it's like slaughtering. Well, Zarak nami avle kein zrika. Well, throwing it is like sprinkling the blood. So you should be chayiv. So Amrway, so Rava responds, but zrika mishtaberes v'leika. No, the sprinkling, when you throw something in the temple, that's throwing it in a manner which it's loose, that it's not all connected. And here, when you throw the stick, it's all connected. It's called a zrika mishtaberes, a broken throw. The Gemara says, let's challenge Rava's idea, Esvei. So the Gemara challenges Rava that you need a broken throw in order to be liable. Let's say you fed the idol feces or you threw urine in front of it. Chayev, you're going to be liable. So according to Rava, Bishlama Avet Shalmei Reglayim, I understand why if you threw the urine, you'll be liable. Because Rika Mishtaberes on top of an aleph, that's like the broken. That's like the broken. That's like the broken throw of the temple. Now it's soa my Rika Mishtaberesika, but when it comes to the soa, when it comes to the feces, how is that a Zrika Mishtaberes? The Gemara says, I'll tell you how. You have it b'tsoa lacha. You have it if the feces is loose, and so then it's like the sprinkling of blood because it's a zrika mishtaberes, it's a broken throw. So the Gemara says, Leima ketanai. Let's say this position of Rav that if you break the stick, you're liable, but if you throw it, you're exempt. Let's say this statement of Rav is actually a reflection of a machokas tanayim. Because we say shachat lachagav, that if you slaughtered a grasshopper, Rabbi Yehuda machayev chachamim potrim. So Rabbi Yehuda says you're liable for slaughtering the grasshopper to the idolatry. Presumably this was an idol that was not typically worshipped with slaughtering a grasshopper. Rabbi Yehuda says you're liable. Chachamim say you're exempt. Okay, what's the argument? The Marasavar, one must be of the opinion, Amrinan Kein Zvicha, that Marasavar lo Amrinan Kein Zvicha. So one must be of the opinion that we require it to be done in the manner similar to the temple, to the service in the temple. So Rabbi Yehuda Savar with Rashi that you need it to be just similar to the slaughtering in the temple. And so since in the temple, even though you're slaughtering the grasshopper, you're not really slaughtering, but it's like the slaughtering. And so therefore you're liable. So Chachamim say, no, it has to be exactly the same way as the temple in order for you to be liable. So Rabbi Yehuda, Rav is like Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, and Rav is not like the Chachamim, which is the assumption. The Gemara says, no. Gemara says, no, no, both opinions would say, we don't say it's good enough, like Rav said, that you just need it to be slaughtered. Ela came panim. You need it to be exactly bainyan. Neshani chagav hol v'tzavaro domo tzavar beima. And position of Rabbi Yehuda is the reason why you're liable for slaughtering the grasshoppers is that's exactly like slaughtering an animal. It's the same thing because the neck of the grasshopper is like the neck of an animal. So Rav is actually inconsistent with both Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Rav can be inconsistent because Rav is a Tana. Rav Nachman, because Rav can be a Tana. Rav Tana who Pog, he's able to argue with the Tanaim. Rav Nachman, Rav Baravu, Rav Avodah Zarah she'od didn't sell b'makol shever, b'akol b'fanei chayiv. And now it adds on a line into what we said earlier from Rav. Not only are you liable if you serve by breaking the stick, but also Vineseres. So not only are you liable if you break the stick in front of it, but it's also the stick becomes prohibited. Zarak makol lefaneh. But if you just throw the stick in front of it, then we're going to say chayev. Then you are liable ve'eino neseres, and you are not, and the stick is not going to be prohibited. So here, why are you liable in this case? Because Rashi says that this is we're talking about idolatry that was worshipped in this manner, but the stick is not going to be liable. It's not going to be prohibited because it's only going to be considered an offering if it's done in the manner in which the offering was done in the temple. And since this was not an offering done in the temple, you're not going to be liable. So Amrei Rav Nachman Ma'ishna Shever Davle Kein Zvicha. So why are you liable for the breaking, but you're not liable for the sprinkling? Amarle, so Rav Nachman responds, but because this is not a broken throw, so therefore you're not liable. Well, if that's the case, let's say the Marcolis stones, which is the Marcolis, as we said, is worship by throwing the stones, but how are they going to be prohibited? If that's the case that we need it to be done, we need the worshiping to be done in a similar manner that it's done in the temple. How are you liable by throwing the stones to the Marcois? So Rav Nachman says this was also difficult for me. It's because we were making it like you're building up the idolatry. It's like you're building a tower for the idolatry. And so therefore, by putting it on, by building it up, therefore that's the offering. And so therefore, that's how you're worshiping it. She says, Tosefas al Marcos Katan Leos Marcos Gadol. It's like you're adding on to the small Marcos to make it a big Marcos. So it's like you're making, not that it's an offering to idolatry, but it's actually the idolatry. But when it comes to a stick, you're not making an idolatry because the main idolatry is not the stick. And so therefore that's why you're liable for the Marcois, for the stones, but that's why you're liable for the Marcois stones. So the Gemara says, yeah, that only makes sense according to the one who says that when an idolater builds an idolatry, it's immediately prohibited, as we'll see that this is a dispute on the base. We already had it back on Memvav. But according to the one who says it's only prohibited once it's worshipped, Tishtri, then these stones should be permitted. Now, because he hasn't worshipped yet. So the Gemara answers, I might know. Each time you throw it, it becomes an idolatry, but at the same time it becomes an idolatry, it's also becoming an offering to the stone that was there beforehand. So the Gemara says, okay, fine, if that's the case, then the last stone, because the last stone was not being worshipped yet, so therefore it should be permitted. Yeah. If you know which stone it is, go and take it. So it's just we don't know which stone it is, but indeed you're right. So Rav Ashi says, no, a different answer. No, that itself is the way that the Marcois is worshipped, by building it up. And so therefore each stone is part and parcel of it being built as an idolatry, is it's also being worshipped at the same time. Tanan, so the Gemara says, we cite a statement that we learned in the Mishnah Namabeis, and we're going to challenge a statement that we said from Rav Gidal earlier, that only something that is worshipped in this manner inside the temple can become prohibited because of an offering to idolatry. And Rabbah also had said that it needs to be Zrika Mishtaberes in order to be similar to the offering of idolatry. So we learn on the Mishnah on the base, Matzah Barosho Ksusu Mos, okay, and let's see, find on the idolatry money, clothing, money, or utensils. It's permitted. If find clusters of grapes or stalks of grain with their berries on them, the yenos shmeina v'slas, that's wine, oil, flour. Or anything that's similar to being brought on the altar, also it's prohibited. So the Gemara says, let's analyze this. I understand wine, oil, flour, ikakain, panim, ikakain, zrika, mishaberes. Those, it's like an offering, meaning to say they are offered in the temple. Some say with the bikurim, or some say with the yayin nesach, and it's also a zrika mishaberes. But the clusters of grapes and the stalks of grain, there's no, you never offer the clusters of grapes or the clusters of berries, and it's not as Rika Mishtaberes. So Amarula could go in Shabbat. No, when they were harvested, they were harvested for the purpose of their offering to idolatry. And the Betsira, the harvesting, is like the slaughter because you're breaking off the cluster like you were breaking the neck. Okay, in order to be liable, you have to make an offering to idolatry in the manner in which you worship in the temple. So let's say you make an offering to the idolatry, and it has a blemish on the animal, you're exempt. As it says, which means the Torah only prohibits the idolatry, the worship, if it was done in a manner similar to the temple. Now, what are we talking about? What's the blemish? If we're talking about a cataract on the eye, which was also, as we saw this week earlier, that was the blemish of Bar Kamsa made to cause the Jews trouble with the Roman emperor. It must be the case. Now we're not talking about something that's a cataract in the eye, because even a Noahide can bring it on their bama. So for sure, the idolater would not be considered to be exempt on that. So what's it talking about? We're talking about if the idolater makes an offering of an animal that's missing a limb, will be exempt. How do I know that if a Noahide makes an offering of an animal missing a limb, he's prohibited? So it says in the Torah that Noah had to bring out the ark, 2 of each animal. Bring an animal that all of its limbs are intact. So Gemara says, how can you use the words Mikol Chai to tell us that the Noahides have to bring an animal with all of its limbs intact? Don't we need Mikol Chai to exclude a treifa from being brought onto the ark? The Gemara says, no, that we learn out from the pasuk Avodah Zarah, that it has to be capable of reproducing. Well, this is another dispute, whether or not a treifa, an animal that's mortally wounded, is able to produce children. So according to when it says treifa yoledes, that what would we say? Michael Mamer. So Gemara says, Amakra. Says the pasuk says the Noach was supposed to bring into the ark chayos itach to live with you, itach b'domelach. That it's b'domelach. That has to be similar to you. Just like you're not a treifa, the animal also cannot be a treifa. So the Gemara says, "V'doma Noach gufei treifa." How do we know Noach was not a treifa? The Gemara says, "No, we know Noach couldn't have been a treifa. Tamim ksivbei, because it says he is supposed to be tamim. Tamim means pure. V'doma tamim b'drachav. Maybe it means just he's a good guy. V'doma tamim b'drachav. No, it doesn't mean that it's just a good guy, because there we already have tzaddik ksivbei. Or he says he was righteous. V'doma tamim b'drachav, tzaddik b'masa. Maybe it's 2 different types of good. Tzaddik in his deed, tamim in his ways, and tzaddik in his deed. The Gemara says, no, it's amras. But no, we shouldn't say that. We wouldn't say that. The Noach gufei treifa have. We can't say that Noach himself was a treifa. These Sagadei Noach treifa have, because if you say Noach was a treifa, the kabasach ayil shleimin l'tayil. Are we saying that Noach was only supposed to bring in a treifa, but not somebody who is Not a treifa. Hashta did not fuck. So therefore, the Gemara says Hashka did not fuck meitach. So since we say that the animal can't be a treifa from the words itach, similar to you, achayot zera. So why would, according to that position, why do you need the pasuk to say achayot zera? Ime itach. Gemara says, well, if it was just from you, hava amino etzapta ba'alma. It's just for companionship. The animals they brought in, afilu zakim, afilu seris, even if it's an older animal or a animal that's unable to reproduce. That animal has to be not an older animal or animal unable to reproduce, was not supposed to bring to the ark. So then the Gemara says, Amar Abelazar minayin v'shochei behemo markoas shulchayv. How do I know if you slaughter an animal to markoas, you're liable? Shenemar v'oyiz b'chu ad zivchayhem v'seirim. It says in the pasuk, you're not allowed to bring their offerings to seirim. Meinu inyul kedar. That's obviously not the worshiping in the normal manner. This refers to if you worship an animal, idolatry in a manner which is not the typical way of worshiping that idolatry, but it is a typical way of serving in the temple, then you'd be liable. So the Gemara says, is that what this pasuk is teaching us? We need it for the following brisa. The next brisa is going to be very long, and at the end of the brisa, it's going to tell us our question. Says the brisa, that it says, when it says to the Pesach Moed, you're not allowed to bring that a person who brings shchutei chutz is liable because he didn't bring his offering outside. He didn't bring his offering in the temple. So the Gemara says, talking about a case where we know we're talking about a case if he sanctified it when there was prohibition to sanctify it outside the temple, called the prohibition in the Bamos to bring offerings outside the temple. And he brought it during that time of Bamos. There the punishment is listed as it says Al Pesach Al Moed Lo Ibiu. Onesh Shemana. We know that there's a punishment for this, but Asar Minai. And how do we know that there was a warning against it? Tamomer Pentaleh Olasecha. That you can't bring your olos outside the temple area during that time. Rabbi Oven. Amar Rabbi Elijah. Amar Rabbi Oven. Amar Elijah. Malcolm Shenemar Yishamar Pen Va'ala Enu Elablo Sase. That's a prohibition. Mikame Elach Umedaber Bekachim Sheikdishim Mishas Heter Abamos. From that point on, in the pasuk, from the pasuk says "Aman Yasher Viu ve'elach" and onward, that includes the prohibition. It's talking about kachim, sacred offerings that you consecrated when the bamos were permitted. V'kribam b'shas isar bamos, but then you decided to bring them after the bamos became prohibited, meaning after the Mishkan was built or the temple was built. The children should bring their offerings that they brought that I had already allowed to you. This teaches us Muhammad called Zovech Bama B'Shas Isra Bamos. Whoever makes an offering to a bama when the bamas are prohibited, Mala because of Kilo Zovech Hapanei Asada. It's like he's making an offering to idolatry. Ve'eviu Hashem Zu Mitzvah Sasa. You bring it to God. That's a positive commandment. Mitzvah so say mina. And I don't know it's a negative commandment. It says can't bring their offering. So anyway, we see from here, from this pasuk, that the pasuk is teaching us that you can't bring an offering to the bamos, even if it was sanctified before when the bamos were allowed. So if that's the case, there is no warning. We can't use the pasuk to teach us that it's prohibited to make a sacrifice to an idolatry if that's not the typical way of worshiping it. So the Gemara answers after this very long brisa. The Gemara says it's not a question. There's two prohibitions within that one verse. Says the Mishnah, Matzah berosho maos ksuso keom. Let's say you find on the top of the idol money, clothing, or utensils. That's going to be permitted because we're going to say that is not worshiping the idolatry. Let's say you find on the idol, you find clusters of grapes or stalks of berries, so you have wine, oil, and flour, or anything similar. That is kara v'gavim mizbeach. That is brought on the altar. Asur. Then it's prohibited. So the Gemara says, "Minahani mili." Where do we know this halacha that if you find money, clothing, or utensils on the altar, it's permitted? Amar Reb Chiya bar Yotzei, Amar Moshe, Kosev Echad Amar V'Teruah Shekutzayim Eskulayim Eitz V'Even V'Kesef V'Zahav Asher Imahen. That they saw their abominations, their money, their gold, their silver that was with them. Kosev Echad Omer Osachmo Kesef V'Zahav Aleim. Another verse says you're not allowed to desire the money, the gold and silver that's on them. Okay, it said Imayim Dumya Daleim. With them has to be similar to upon them. Just upon them, it's like upon them, it's only if it's prohibited if it's something that's decorative. But if it's not decorative, it's permitted. Also with them, never shall know also with them, it's only prohibited if it's something that's beautifying them. The Gemara says, maybe upon them is similar to with them. Just like with them, anything with them. Sha'aleim, also anything on them. Gemara says, no, Imkain will yomar alehem. So if that would be the case, it wouldn't have said alehem. So the Gemara says, Ma'os davar shal noyu, is money something that's beautification? Amri debei Rabbi Yana, yes, we're talking about a case, but Gemara says, how can you say money is not a beautification? The Gemara says, we're talking about a case, says Rabbi Yana, but kashor. We're talking about like a wallet that's tied around, is like you're hiding it there on the neck. Sus davar shanoi is in clothing beautification. I mean, we're talking about a case because so you're using like a closet for your clothes. Kli davar shanoi is in a utensil, something that's beautifying. Amar Papa, this chlifoi mashkil ratio. They basically turned it upside down. Anything that's inside the curtains of idolatry, even if it's water or salt, is going to be prohibited because we assume it's like a worshipping to the idolatry. If it's outside the curtains, if it's beautifying it, it's prohibited. But if it's not beautifying it, it is permitted. Okay, so then the Gemara says, we have a teaching, and we have a teaching that we don't care about the curtains for Pa'or or for Marcos. What is that teaching us? If you want to say that even the inside is like the outside, Vishari, and it's permitted, if they defecate in front of it, for sure they'll bring water and salt to it. So therefore, to say even the outside of the curtains is like the inside and it's prohibited. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Nud Aleph on the base. Says the Mishnah, Avodas Kachavim Shayala Gina. Avodas Kachavim Shayala Gina Merchatz Nenemehan Shalobetova. If you have an idolatry that has a garden or a bathhouse, then if the idolatry owns the garden or the bathhouse, you're allowed to use their garden or the bathhouse as long as you don't pay their priest. Because we have the concept, Rashi says, that just because the idolatry owns it doesn't make it idolatry. There's no concept of hektish, of something owned like by sacred property, by temple, by idolatry. But if you have to pay the priest, you can't do it because you're not allowed to pay them because they're going to give the idolatry, they're going to give the money to the idolatry. What's the Rimi Renul says? What's the reason why you can't pay them? So that they don't go and give back to Bezam and Aleph and Avodah Zarah, so they don't give praise to their God, and so therefore they cause his name to be mentioned. Whereas Rabbeinu Tam says that the reason is But Rabbeinu Tam says that the reason is because they're going to give the profits to the idolatry. There's a fundamental dispute. Let's say there's a partnership. Then you're allowed to benefit whether or not you pay. Asur miyad. If the idolater makes the idolatry, it's immediately prohibited. But for a Jew, it's only prohibited once it's worshipped. Amar Baya betovas komrim. When it says that betova means you pay the priest. Shelo betovas kol. When it says without shelo betova means that you don't pay the priest. Lafuke tovas ovdal deshari. But you're allowed to pay the people who are working there who are not the priests. Some learn this teaching on the next clause. If it is belonging, if it's a partnership, then you can benefit from it whether or not you pay. Amar Abaye betova, and about that Abaye said betova sacherim. And when it says betova, it means that if you pay others, shelo betova is komrin, means you don't pay the priest. Ma'ad demas seifa. One who learns this on the second clause. The one who learns this on the second clause, that in the bathhouse of other partnership, you can benefit only when you pay others, not the priest. For sure, he learns it on the first clause that even if it's owned by the idolatry, you can pay the others. Umanda masni aresha, but the one who learns in the first clause of a seifa, but for the latter clause, given the ikach, since it's a partnership, I feel tovas komer namish. You can even pay the priest because it's a partnership. It would be difficult because the priest would still go and give their praise, and the priest might still give the money to the idolatry. So why, if there's a partnership, would you be exempt? But it still adopts that position. Okay, so now the Gemara says, okay, we'll stop here. This is today's daf. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem, this is the daf. We'll